very big thank you to Darren there for news. Darren's going to be back at past for the headlines. You're very welcome to the show. My name is Brenda. You're listening to Screen Connections here on Cork City Community Radio. Every Sunday from 1 to 2, we look at some music from the movies, all connected by a theme. And today we're looking at Hollywood legend Bette Davis. And I'm delighted to say I'm going to have some very special guests in the studio to talk through Bette Davis's career, some of her biggest films, some of her quotes, mainly insults. And we're going to be talking about bringing a version of Bette Davis's most famous film, All But Eve, to the stage on Cork Arts Theatre in November. So I hope you're able to stick with me for the hour. We're going to kick off the show with some music. And first, a little change of pace. I'm going to play a clip from one of Bette Davis's most recognisable films. We're going to hear a little clip from the film Now Voyager. So hopefully this will play through. And then we're going to hear the main title from the film.
May I sometimes come here?
Whenever you like. It's your home, too. There are people here who love you.
I look at you and Tina, share with you peace and contentment.
Of course. And just think it won't be for this time only. That is, if you will help me keep what we have. If we both try hard to protect that little strip of territory that's ours. We can talk about your child.
Our child. And will you be happy, Charlotte?
Oh, Jerry, don't let's ask for the moon. We have the stars.
The old Hollywood themes always ending on a big kind of triumphant crescendo there. We had the main theme to Now Voyager, which was released in 1942, directed by Irving Rapper. It starred Bette Davis as Charlotte Vale, a repressed and frumpy heiress who transforms into a confident and elegant woman under the guidance of Dr. Jacquet, played by Claude Rains. And Bette Davis delivers a memorable performance which earned her an Academy Award nomination, and Paul Henreid plays Jerry Durance. You heard him in the clip that we played just before the theme. And he's the man who ignites her passion, and together they create one of cinema's most iconic on-screen couples. And that quote at the end, "Don't let's ask for the moon, we have the stars," pops up quite a lot in terms of the most famous Hollywood quotes, and Bette Davis has quite a few of those. We'll be coming to those through our discussion with my very special guests in studio. Before I introduce them to you, you are listening to Screen Connections here on Cork City Community Radio. We're looking at Bette Davis today, and I'm sure people definitely know who Bette Davis is, but I'll just give you a little bit of background. Her birth name is Ruth Elizabeth Bette Davis. She was born in 1908, and she's an American actress with a career spanning more than 50 years and 100 acting credits. And she's noted for playing unsympathetic, sardonic characters, and her famous performances span a wide range of film genres, from contemporary crime melodramas to historical films, suspense horror and occasional comedies, although her great success tended to be in romantic dramas. And she's the recipient of 2 Academy Awards, and she was the first thespian to accrue 10 nominations. So we're going to discuss with my very special guest in studio today. I'm joined by 3 wonderful actresses in their own right. 3 leading ladies from a production of The Wisdom of Eve, which is coming to the Cork Arts Theatre in November. And I have to say that I do have a vested interest, because I'm directing these lovely ladies in that that run of that show. So we have Jean Van Sinderen-Law, who has the an unenviable task of taking on Margo, Bette Davis's iconic character. Then we have Karen Ray, who's playing the treacherous Eve Harrington, and we have Adriana Dineen, who is going to be playing Karen Richards in the film. So I'm just going to open the floor to the ladies and ask them what is their overriding thought on Bette Davis as a Hollywood icon and as an actress. So Jean, I'm going to come to you first, because you've probably been thinking a lot about Bette Davis over the last couple of months, I'd say more than weeks.
I certainly have, Brenda, and as you said, it is quite an honour to take on a role that was played initially and so brilliantly by Bette Davis, and there's no way in taking on a role like that you'll ever try to emulate what she did. But she, as an individual, she's a consummate professional. She was known always to be on time. She was known always to know her lines at the onset, and indeed, apparently, she knew everyone else's lines as well. She was incredibly courageous. And what I really love about her is that she was, in the Hollywood golden era, but she didn't aspire to be one of those beautiful sirens that we, associate with that period. Yeah. She was very happy to play the ugly duckling. She shaved her hairline to play Queen Elizabeth I. So she was very courageous. She loved working. She also, and obviously was very successful because she had, as you said earlier,
10 Academy Awards,
10 nominations. So I think she's always been a force to be reckoned with, and I think she was always outspoken. I've listened to interviews, in her final years in her late 70s, early 80s, and she was a very defiant woman, and she said it as it is, and she didn't sugarcoat it. And the character that I'm playing, Margo Crane, is the same type of character. So I truly believe that Margo Crane in it is indeed Bette Davis.
Is a reflection of kind of the standards that she held herself to outside of the performance, but in her real life as well.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she brought herself, I think, to that role in a very, very strong way. So listening to the lines, reading the lines and listening to them and hearing the words speak to you gives a great insight actually into the head, I believe, of Bette Davis.
And Adriana, that's something you mentioned to me before, is that you love that Bette Davis was, she wasn't afraid to play grotesque characters for the sake of the performance or art.
No, because one of the movies I watched recently was, What Happened to Baby Jane, and let's face it, Betty isn't looking her absolute best in that.
She leans into it, she leverages.
She really did, and even the makeup was well over the top. So, and that's what I admire about her.
Yeah. I actually read somewhere that this might not be true, that she didn't take off the makeup every day. She'd kind of get them to reapply layers of the previous days.
And what's even interesting, one of Margot's lines is, I'm damned if I'm taking off this makeup, I'll just pat it down.
So she obviously leveraged that for the performance. Karen, you were saying you love Whatever Happened to Baby Jane as well.
Yeah, it's not just one of my favourite Bette Davis movies. It's one of those movies that a few of my friends will know that I've given them DVDs over the years going, did you watch it yet? Did you watch it yet? I absolutely loved it from a young enough age, and I think it came on over Christmas again, so I rewatched it, and I'm stuck on every second of it. It's just captivating, and it's just like it's the horror genre. Which is, I would never be somebody who'd be kind of saying, I'd love a good horror movie, but it's different.
And also, you don't associate leading actresses of that time with the horror genre. You might have had some ghost stories, but that's kind of a real psychological horror. There's not a lot of those for leading actresses at that time.
And I think, apart from doing kind of transformative characters and very different characters, I think Bette Davis was kind of the first villain, in a sense, the first female villain. I remember seeing, I don't know, was it part of a film studies thing I did in college or something, but I remember seeing excerpts of Human Bondage.
Yes, whatever first big role. Now, she has an appalling Cockney accent, and the accent is terrible. But she goes for it. If you've never seen a peroxide blonde Bette Davis. Yeah. And just a little tidbit, one of her first Oscar nominations, because people wrote in her name on the ballot, she actually came third in terms of voting. People voted for her for that performance. She was not officially nominated. People wrote her name. That's how much they loved the performance and loved Bette Davis. But sorry, Karen.
Oh no, I just remember seeing it, kind of going, you'd be watching all these clips of and movies of that kind of era, and even in the decades afterwards, the kind of typical black and white movies, and to see a woman sing lines that vicious and that risque, and it really, like, she set a precedent for that kind of
And it's interesting because her co-star in that it's Leslie Howard, isn't it? Who played
Howard
Ashley
from
in Gone with the Wind.
yeah.
So he had a certain reputation, or the audience would have known him as being a certain genteel kind of person, and then for Bette Davis to be tearing strips off him in that film is quite... Now, I'm not sure if he'd done Gone with the Wind at that stage, but yeah, she really kind of plays a really sharp, unsympathetic character in that film. She's, like I said, never afraid to do that.
Yeah, it was unnerving, I think, and that was similar to Baby Jane as well. You're just like, what is she going to say next, or what is she going to do next? It's just...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is a film that came at a very interesting time in her career and Joan Crawford's career. And I know I asked you to have a look at insults and quotes. We'll come to that in a moment. But it just shows how the art came above everything. She obviously didn't have a good relationship with Joan Crawford, but she wouldn't let that get in the way of a good role, which I think is very interesting to come to. So what I'm going to do is just take a quick break, and then we're going to hear a minute, and it's just going to be a minute, of the song that Bette Davis sings in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, because it's, as Karen said, you wouldn't be bopping to it on a Sunday when you hear it. It's so just keep in mind, I will only be playing a minute of this, but we're just going to come to some ads first, and then we're going to go into that.
I've written a letter to Daddy saying I love you.
That's probably enough of I've written a letter to Daddy. So if you've never seen Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, that might seem like the most bizarre piece of music ever. It stars Bette Davis as Baby Jane Hudson, a former child star who becomes a caretaker for her paraplegic sister Blanche Hudson, played by Joan Crawford. It was released in 1962, directed by Robert Aldrich, and the film is a chilling psychological thriller showcasing the deteriorating relationship between the two sisters and their slow descent into madness. I was just saying there, it's cute when a 6-year-old sings it, not when a 46-year-old sings it. So I didn't subject you to the full 3.5 minutes, but it is out there if anyone wants to hear the conclusion of it. And as we were saying before the break, the film is interesting because of the, I suppose, personal compromises that both Bette Davis and Joan Crawford undertook to be in the film. Both of them were kind of in a decline in their professional careers, so they kind of thought, what would be better box office draw than two mortal enemies teaming up and being in a film together. But yeah, some of the things I asked my lovely guests in studio today to look at some of Bette Davis's quotes, and a lot of them are directed at Joan Crawford. For context, because I looked up, I said, why were they such terrible, or I suppose great enemies, terrible to each other? I think it all stems back to a man. They seem to have been vying for the attentions of a common beau back in the 1930s. Francois Tone, I think his name was. Anyway, Betty didn't get him. Joan Crawford got him temporarily, and they never got on since. So a lot of Bette Davis's best, most remembered quotes are directed at Joan Crawford. So I'm going to throw it out. Does anyone have a favourite Bette Davis insult or quote? If it's an insult, maybe we'll go first. But if it's a quote, we'll do another round.
Well, there's a character called Regina Giddens in The Little Foxes, 1941, and she says, "You're not worth the powder to blow you up."
Was that in the film?
Yeah,
I haven't seen that one. That's brilliant.
And she always has these sharp things. I actually love in The Wisdom of Eve, one of my favourite quotes, and it's an insult, when she's talking to Lloyd Roberts and she says, "Do I look the frigid type, you blind booby? You must be out of your idiotic mind."
She definitely doesn't hold her characters, and in her personal life, I think probably a lot of scripts that got directed towards her was because of the persona she had in real life, like being able to throw those insults around. Karen, did you have a favourite Bette Davis?
I'm thinking of directing at Joan Crawford, and I know the media, really milked that whole feud between them, probably exaggerated it a lot. But remember when Joan Crawford died, she said something like, I was always told you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. Say only good things. Joan Crawford is dead. Good.
And you can imagine her delivering that line
So,
exactly well.
it was that
She
grim.
did. I have a quote here as well. Before I come to Adriana, she said, "The best time I ever had with Joan Crawford was when I pushed her down the stairs and whatever happened to Baby Jane."
Oh, I mean, she's brutal.
And this one, now, she had a filthy mouth. Like, Bette Davis had no problem in cursing, so I'm going to bleep this out. Why am I so good at playing, insert B word here? I think it's because I'm not a B word. Maybe that's why Joan Crawford always plays ladies.
She's terrible.
I mean, that's just ridiculous. Adriana, is there anything outside of those ones that caught your eye?
Yeah, one of the ones that caught my eye was it's better to be hated for who you are than to be loved for someone you're not. It's a sign of your worth sometimes if you're hated by the right people.
Yeah,
And
I think Bette Davis seems to have, and we were discussing this beforehand, she wasn't very sympathetic to polite women.
no, there was an incident
Yes,
which,
yeah.
ironically enough, when Celeste Holm came on the set for All About Eve, she walked in very politely and cheerfully and went, "Good morning," and Bette Davis went, "Oh my God, good manners," and they never clicked.
Never spoke again.
No.
She seems to have had more time for her male co-stars. She really did love Claude Rains. She said he was one of his favourite people in Hollywood. She did a couple of films with him. So she did Now Voyager. She did Deception, which was also with Paul Henreid. Was not very nice to women, though ironically, Karen, she got on very well with Anne Baxter, who played Eve in the film.
Yeah, apparently they were great friends, and I was thinking about when she was doing Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and how the studios really wanted the feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford to, they fueled it and manipulated it themselves in order to get the best performance out of the two of them on stage.
I have a few little bits here to add to this scenario. Excuse me, but I just throw this in here.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's scenes where Joan requested a body double, where Baby Jane is hitting her because she didn't trust Betty not to hit her with extra force.
Oh, goodness.
Now, I would say this is all allegedly. While shooting their characters, Betty struck Joan so hard she supposedly required stitches. Joan, to remember the character is paraplegic, Joan reportedly filled her pockets with rocks and attached other heavy objects to her person to make herself heavier for a scene where Baby Jane has to drag her down a hallway. I mean,
Gosh.
Yes.
They put everything into it.
And as a result, Bette Davis suffered minor pains as a result of repeatedly having to reshoot scenes where she had to drag Joan. So they were professional to a point. They couldn't fully put grievances aside.
Can I come in on that as well? I think, though, at the same time, that aside from the personal stuff, I think that they still admired each other as actresses. And like Joan Crawford was the star and Bette Davis was the actress,
Yes, but I think that caused a little bit of tension too, because she thought that Joan Crawford took roles that always put her in this beautiful ladylike light, whereas Bette Davis thought playing gritty characters was more authentic. So they did have that little bit of maybe grudging respect, but I think Bette Davis thought that she was a bit too concerned with her appearance or her persona rather than the art of it. Yeah. Though, ironically, I do think Bette Davis could have played something like Mildred Pierce. To me, that's a character that Joan Crawford played. Sorry, Adriana.
No, because in the movie All About Jane, the director had wanted Joan to take her nail varnish off. She was very proud of her nails. Yeah. And when she's coming down the stairs, they had to carefully, kind of almost blur that out. So
and then she wouldn't.
Joan was actually quite vain about her appearance. So, that's why I admired Betty. She actually, it was the art of being the character.
Above everything.
Yeah.
And sorry, Jean, you mentioned that she shaved the front of her head. Would you do that for a role?
It would depend, Brenda. I'm not so sure I'll do it now for the wisdom of Eve. Just as well it's not needed. But Yeah, I mean, people do.
That would have been unheard of.
If you
you'd get a guaranteed Oscar out of that today.
and the thing is, if you had a role like that, it's probably a role that you'd be signing up for a major feature film.
Yeah.
And my goodness, yeah, that's a simple thing to do, considering what people go through if they have to have treatment, So yes, I would do that.
It's on record there now. If anyone wants to change it. It's interesting that you said there about the type of movie that she did that for was just a studio movie, but we were talking beforehand about Bette Davis's role in breaking the studio system. She really is a pioneer in that way. A lot of people recognise Olivia de Havilland as being the person whose case broke the stars from the movie studio contracts, but Bette Davis was actually the first to kind of in the spotlight do that. Are you aware of this story?
Yeah, I don't know too much of the detail, but I do know Bette Davis went off to England, and Warner Brothers were...
Jack Warner, the head of Warner Brothers Studio, he was adamant that she would star in... So the way the contract system worked, if you declined a role, it was added to the end of your contract, so you couldn't just deny roles and wait out your contract. It was just added to the end of it. And Bette Davis was not happy with the script she was getting. She thought it was junk. She wanted to play more complex characters. She wanted to act with the best actors, the best directors. He kind of dangled potentially Gone with the Wind in front of her. He said, "Oh, I'm about to get this," and no. So none of it was playing it. So she did. She kind of absconded during the night, went from New York up to Canada, got a boat over to Britain, and she worked with Maurice Chevalier. I think she was being offered roles with Maurice Chevalier in Europe. She was basically going to go to Europe. Anyway, legal fees and stuff all racked up, and she ended up coming back. But I think he really wanted to portray her as this self-entitled star and get the public to go against her, but it didn't really seem.
But doesn't that really illustrate just how ambitious she was?
Absolutely.
Nothing was going to get in the way of her pursuing her love and her passion for performance.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, we'll take another little bit of music. I'm going to play, just to give us a little breather there from talking all about Bette Davis. I have one of her later roles. We'll play the piece from this. She, again, this is kind of a grotesque character, but she was in the version of Death on the Nile. Do you remember it? Which also, that harks back, we did a version of Death on the Nile in the UCC Players a couple of years ago, but she plays kind of a Maggie Smith is her kind of maid in it, isn't it? Yeah. So we've got the Nina Rota theme from Death on the Nile. There we have the very atmospheric theme to 1978's version of Death on the Nile, which was directed by John Guillermine. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. The director names always throw me. But it is an adaptation of Agatha Christie's novel, and it features an incredible ensemble cast, including Peter Ustinov as Hercule Poirot, the famous Belgian detective. Bette Davis plays Mrs. Van Schuyler, a wealthy and sharp-tongued American widow, and the film is a murder mystery set on a luxury cruise along the River Nile, with Davis's character as one of the suspects in the case. So you are listening to Screen Connections if you've just joined us. My name's Brenda, and from 1 to 2 we look at music from the movies. This week we're looking at Hollywood icon Bette Davis, and I do have some very special guests in studio with me because we're going to spend the next remainder of the show talking about one of Bette Davis's, I would say arguably her most famous film, which is the film All About Eve. And I have the very great privilege of directing a stage version, which is titled The Wisdom of Eve, which is the inspiration for the film, with my guests today, who are looking at me just across the desk here. So I've got Jean Van Sinderen-Law, who's playing Margo Crane, as is in the stage version, Margo Channing in the film. Then I have Karen Ray, who's playing Eve Harrington, and Adriana Dineen, who is playing Karen Richards in the film. So ladies, you've spent a lot of time, we have collectively, and our amazing cast who aren't here today, looking at forensically the appeal of All About Eve, the wisdom of Eve, having spent so much time on it, what have you taken away from it? Were you fans of the film before I approached you and captured all of your free time for my nefarious purposes? But were you fans of the film?
Well, ironically enough, a couple of years ago, I think it was probably during COVID, I had bought the movie All About Eve. So when you came to me, Brenda, and said you were doing the play, I said, oh my God, I said, one of my favourite black and white movies. So yeah, I was thrilled then to be involved in this project. So
it's funny, it's a film that sometimes people look at you with the blank face and they don't really recognise, and it's because it's actually, I have it here, along with Titanic and what was the other one? I have this listed here. It has like the record for the most nominations.
Yes.
Nominations.
I think second only to Titanic, in fact.
Yeah, it doesn't have the most wins, but it has 14 nominations.
Incredible.
All 4 actresses, so Bette Davis, Anne Baxter, Celeste Holm, Thelma Ritter, all got Oscar nominations. First time, and I think the only time, that 4 actresses from the same film got Oscar nominated. Now, they were in the same categories, so I think vote was split. Nobody won. None of those women won Oscars that year. But it was hugely beloved at the time, but it doesn't seem to have quite the same recognition, maybe, as some other films from that era.
I think it's really, really appealing because the themes showcased in it are themes which have transcended time. And, you know, I think people may just not know about it because they just don't know about a 1950s movie. You know, if you speak to your kids even about Bette Davis, that's the sad thing about it, is that, you know, give it 2 generations and her name will be, you know, in the history books only. But what fascinated me always about the film, and then when and the play, and I'm sure you're going to talk about that in a while, Brenda, the play and how that came about and how the film came about and the script. So we'll come to that. But in the meantime, the theme, to have a film where they're focusing of, you know, a theatrical world within a theatrical world. So we're playing.
We love that.
We love that because
it's the world within the world, and it's peeking behind the curtain.
Correct. It's the world within the world. So when people will come to see the play, The Wisdom of Eve, or watch the film, they will be seeing people like us on stage performing a story which is set in the theatre world, and that's really interesting. And the other bit that's very interesting from my perspective is the, you know, as they call it, the existential crisis of aging. Not that I'm having a crisis, actually, Brenda, or anything.
And that's the difference, isn't it? I suppose it's important to note there are some differences between the film and the play.
Yes.
And Jean, you were flagging there just in the break. About
yes, the character that I will play on stage is Margo Crane, and she is Margo Channing in the film, and that's the role that Bette Davis has. And in the film, she's not married. In the play, she's happily married to Clem. And
in the film, it's Bill Sampson is her partner, but there's a lot more uncertainty around their relationship.
Correct.
Whereas in the play,
her baseline, you see, her baseline in the play is that secure background. Yes. And I think it's very interesting because, you know, without giving too much away about the play, suffice to say it's a solid baseline.
And actually, sorry, that's a good point. Maybe people don't know what the outline of the film is. People might be going, okay, this sounds interesting, but I actually have no idea what All About Eve is about. So I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis. You've reminded me there, Jean. So for anyone who doesn't know, All About Eve was directed in 1950, or released in 1950, by Joseph Mankiewicz, starring Bette Davis as Margo Channing, who's a successful Broadway actress. So Jean will be inhabiting that role on stage. Anne Baxter then plays Eve Harrington. Karen, who's going to be playing or embodying Eve Harrington, enters the fray as a devoted fan, but it becomes very clear that she has ulterior motives. And the film is a masterpiece of backstage drama, and we see Davis and Baxter's characters engaging in a power struggle that reveals the cutthroat nature of show business. And the only acting Oscar win was George Sanders, who plays the acerbic theatre critic Addison DeWitt. And I do have a little clip to tee up for that in a moment, but that's the kind of the context of it. So Margo is the star.
Well, she's Margo is definitely the
world,
person,
anyway.
the aging star, and Bette Davis herself. One of her original quotes is that old age is no place for sissies.
Yeah.
So
And
she,
this film really kind of explore. You almost feel like she's doing an internal study of her own place in acting.
absolutely. I mean, the whole thing, the older actress being kind of nudged aside by the younger, more beautiful, all of that, and the ambition. Then go back to the relationship she had with Joan Crawford. They lived in a very, very competitive world. They worked in a competitive world. Competition was all part of it. And then there's all that, age, old versus young. And of course, what's very interesting in this time, speaking, in 2023, is that the absolute appreciation of the brilliance of age, the power of age, the beauty of age.
But it's interesting, in the film, she says, she admits in a scene to being 40 as if it's a death sentence for her.
Unbelievable.
It's funny, there's a scene in the kitchen where she admits to Lloyd, who's the playwright, she's like, I'm 40, she feels like, she said, her line is, I feel like I've taken off all my clothes by admitting it to him, which is funny.
I'd love to be 40 again.
But
you are.
It's interesting that she just really, that's a big thing for her to admit in the film. I might come to you, Karen, because Eve is a villain. She is a villain, but she's a complex villain. Yeah. And she's a villain within the constraints of a particular type of society. So how have you kind of explored that or found that, tackling that?
I'll be honest, this is one of the most complex roles I've ever had to play. I haven't played a villain before, apart from a panto villain. But it's like when Jean was saying there about, it's a play within a play. Eve's character is like an actress within an actress, and then within me, an actress. So
we were saying it's like Inception for
it
acting.
really is. So when you think of like one of the great fears of any actor is to be caught acting. Yeah. But with Eve, you have to let the audience see a little bit of her acting. Yeah. So it's like, it's very tricky to get that right. Knowing how much to give, knowing how much to be, to pull back on. That balance has been the hardest thing to get right. I think that she's really showing the dark side of ambition in a way that is quite chilling, I think. And in the theatrical industry, I think it's not only is it interesting for the audience to see a play within a play, but I think it's very interesting for actors to look at this and see, not exactly see a bit of themselves, thankfully. I can say I don't see much of myself in Eve, but you can see the world of it, and there's aspects of it that are recognisable. And the thing that always fascinated me, the reason I was always drawn to the film, and then when I found out there was a stage version of it, it's that we have three complex women, and Adriana's going to talk about Karen Roberts, who, to me, the more I watch it, is the thread through the film and the play, because we have two very big characters in Margo and in Eve, which the audience will love seeing. But I mean, I as a normal person, a normie, I can't relate to Margo in a way, that is, I love watching her and she's brilliant, but I can't insert myself into Margo's experience. And with Eve, there's something about the way she operates. She is a villain, but she's, like you said, she's not a pantomime villain. There's something very strategic and very, I don't want to say she does dirty methods, but she's like a chess player. She's very strategic.
I think it would be a very interesting study to take all about Eve, or the wisdom of Eve, and translate it into the corporate world. And take the characters.
Like when they translate Hamlet or Macbeth to like Chicago gangland.
Yeah, exactly.
Put all about Eve into the
correct.
World,
If you were to superimpose
a
this on
industry,
a Succession type of TV series, I think there are some very, very interesting parallels. Because it is, there's people...
It's about ambition.
And then there's kindness there as well. People are genuinely looking after others along the way. And then, however, there's deceit going on. There's loyalty, friendships. There's a whole lot in this play and in the film, but I'm going to focus on the play now because we're looking forward to that the week after next. But there's a whole lot of it in the play that you could take and actually superimpose onto any other environment. And I'd be fascinated to see that being mapped onto the corporate world.
There now, somebody has ambitions there to put it in place,
PhD
to adapt
out there for somebody.
To adapt it. What I'm going to do before I come to Adriana to talk about Karen, the third of our complex leading ladies, I'm going to play probably the most famous quote from the little scene that leads up to it in the film, All About Eve. People have probably quoted it a million times in kind of... It pops up on the AFI, the American Film Institution, top quotes of all time. So we'll just give you a little taster of the film and you'll hear the kind of witty banter in this. The script is just razor sharp. So this, you'll recognise the very last line that plays out in this particular clip.
Margo, nothing you've ever done has made me as happy as you're taking Eve in.
I'm so happy you're happy.
Now look here, you haven't been running a settlement house exactly. The kid has earned her way. You had a pretty mixed up inventory when she took over. Merchandise laying all over the shop.
You've got Margo mixed up with a 5 and 10 cent store.
Make it worked out, Goodman. Everything on his proper shelf, Max, all done up in little ribbons. I could die right now and nobody'd be confused. How about you, Max?
How about me what?
Suppose you drop dead. What about your inventory?
I ain't going to drop dead. Not with the heat.
This is the most ghoulish conversation. Thank you.
Nothing.
Max! Mon vieux! Fifi!
The kid, Junior that is, will be down in a minute unless you'd like to take her drink up to her.
I can get a fresh one. Karen, you're a Gibson girl.
Thank you.
The general atmosphere is very Macbethish. What has or is about to happen?
What is he talking about?
Macbeth.
We know you. We've seen you like this before. Is it over or is it just beginning?
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
There we go. No one delivers a line quite like Bette Davis. And I love the lead in too. You have the music and then she turns on the staircase and delivers it in the most dramatic ways.
In that gorgeous dress.
In that fabulous
that
dress
moves with her.
Head directed or designed to dress. I wanted to play that before I teed up you, Adriana, because I think that scene in particular tells you everything you really need to know about Karen and Margo's relationship, because it's very clear that they put up with her dramatic bursts and they still love her for it, particularly Karen. So yeah, how have you found playing that or seeing that through the play of the film?
Well, when I've looked at the movie and I've looked at the play, actually the role of Karen is a little bit different, but I won't go into that too much. But Karen is almost the real person in the scenario. So I think we all have that friend where you almost roll your eyes to heaven and go, oh, there she goes again, or there he goes again. So there's a genuine love and affection there. And you always have the straight person and the comedy person in a lot of friendships, you know, in relationships. So the straight person will often let the person who likes the limelight, and you'll always have the friend who's quite happy to stay back a little bit and watch things happen. But in the play, The Wisdom of Eve, Karen is comes across much more complicated and much more. She's deeper, but she's involved in all the things that you're involved in human relationships. She's involved in loyalty, friendship, hurt, and again, I don't want to give too much away, Brenda, because you won't be happy with me. But the word manipulation. So I won't say who's manipulating who, but I mean it's in the movie, but it comes across differently in the play. So it'll be fun to, if people have seen the movie and then they go see the play, I'm really interested to hear what people will think afterwards. Yes. So so there'll be a little there'll be little surprises. So,
but what comes across in both is that Karen is an incredibly supportive friend, but she's not blinded to somebody's flaws either.
No.
But there's only so much you can take when you're friends with somebody who has a stronger personality.
Yes.
And we were talking about how Celeste Holmes and Bette Davis did not get on. You two are friends.
We're great pals.
I haven't seen demands for private trailers or anything, or get her away from me.
No, we're great pals. It's interesting. I feel in a sense that Margo Crane, she's almost like the innocent bystander, because she
is a little. She's
she really is, because Karen's character, Karen Roberts, is circling around her. Karen Roberts has got money in the venture. Her livelihood depends very much on her husband's success. And her husband's success depends very much on Margo Crane's success. So there's that side of it, and then the other side is, of course, the wonderful Eve, being played by another great pal here, who's being played by Karen.
Yeah, we have a great fun in rehearsal going.
Yeah, but you Karen.
No, not that one. The
it's
other
Eve. But Margo is, again, an innocent bystander in the work and the manipulations of Eve. So I always think of it as like concentric circles. Margo's in the centre, just like doing what she loves doing. Yeah. She wants to be on stage. Come what may, she's happiest there. And, you know, she plays roles sometimes that she doesn't like. And, you know, I knock my brains out for her to commuting cows.
Yeah,
you know, she just, but that's where she's happiest.
Yes.
And then the others are making money.
We should say there's a line, and another one of our cast members is watches inside in the studio. Mike has a line as Lloyd, who says she doesn't come to life. Real life is just something to be struggled through. She only comes alive when she comes on stage.
That's right. So really, she's, you know, she's. I won't say she's incidental. She's not. Yeah. But what's happening in terms of the themes are circling around her.
She's just acting the way she's always, and then but she just tips something over.
That's right.
There are times when she's blissfully unaware of what's happening around her.
Yes. And poor Karen is not, because she's put it in motion.
Yeah.
So that's what I find interesting about it.
And of course, again, if you were to going back to what I was saying about superimposing it, you know, on the corporate or the commercial world, you know, you have two couples who are great friends with each other. The women, like the two couples together, the husbands, the wives, etc. You've that, but you also have a business venture going on between them. Yes. So it's almost like a family business, and all the challenges that can happen with a family business.
Personal fallout happens.
Correct.
Livelihood. And
then what are the ramifications and the implications of that? So I mean, if there's anybody listening in the family business world, they might be interested in coming to see what happens
when personal and professional ties are linked together. So Karen, we're almost out of time. I could talk for another hour about it, but Karen, are you only going to play villains from now on?
Oh, I've got a taste of the dark side.
And you do it well, babe.
Yeah, you do it so ably.
We've been
on to me.
Yeah, we've been doing productions with the UCC players for a couple of years, and we do have a predominantly female membership of the group, and we've always found it so hard to find scripts where there are interesting female characters, complex female characters. So this is a bit of a gem, really, to have three leading roles, and I would say that you're all have equal. I wouldn't say there's really a top billing in terms of leading lady in this production. So, I mean, are you enjoying getting your teeth into something that's a little bit grittier than just the wife or the girlfriend? Or
loving it.
Yeah, and the other thing too, it's also nice to play a role that's, well, almost age appropriate. I won't say what age I am, but sometimes when there's a female role, you're either the old lady or the young girl, the Sive or the whatever. So it's lovely to play characters that you can totally relate to.
Yes.
You know,
yeah,
so.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think Brenda, the point that I mean, they're fantastic roles. There's no doubt about it. And when people come, I mean, there's every emotion. Yeah. There's everything in the play. But I think directed also by a female, produced by Fiona, that's you, Brenda, and written by a wonderful woman, Mary Orr.
Yes. Sorry, we better mention Mary Orr.
Mary Orr.
For people who don't know, the story All About Eve appeared in as a short story in Cosmopolitan back in the 1940s. It was then optioned for the film by Joseph Mankiewicz. She was uncredited on the film. Then herself and her husband went and wrote a stage version, The Wisdom of Eve, and the original short story was called The Wisdom of Eve. So it's almost a short story which inspired a film, and then the stage play was inspired by the short story once she saw how successful it was, and it did resonate, and it was very successful in terms of awards. And then it went on to also be made into a musical story starring Lauren Bacall called Applause in the 70s. So the film was 1950, the stage version did not appear until the 1970s. So it was obviously something that took up a lot of her creative time. She obviously had a real affection and interest in these characters to have stuck with it for 30 years, really.
And of course, we're playing it in the 50s.
We're playing it in the 50s. We're going to stay true to the original film setting of it. So, yes.
And I was going to say, Brenda, that what's very interesting, if this has piqued anybody's interest, obviously we're on between the first, second, third, fourth, and the matinee.
The matinee, yes. So it's the UCC players. I have to give a full shout out to my cast because, oh my God, they've put so much work into this, and we spent a whole day at it yesterday, and it's just been such a time commitment. So I really do have to thank everybody. So obviously we have Adriana Dineen, who's in studio, Reuben Keane, Rosie O'Byrne, Mike O'Keefe, who's our entourage today, sitting in the corner. We have Jim O'Mahony, who you'll recognise from this parish, who's on the Jazz Hour on Saturdays here. Patricia O'Regan, Karen Ray, who's in studio, Mark Rowlands, and of course Jean Van Sinderen-Law. So we are in the Cork Arts Theatre from the 1st to the 4th of November at 8 p.m. and then we are putting on a matinee on the 4th of November at 2 p.m. And having seen the run yesterday, everyone was in costumes, and we had a lot of the musical cues, and we have a lot of jazz. So it's going to be at the end of the jazz festival, but if you want to extend your jazz experience, you could do a whole lot worse than coming to the Cork Arts Theatre to see my lovely ladies and gents on studio. So.
And Brenda, I think you can say fasten your seatbelts.
It's
going to be a bumpy ride. Nice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, ladies. I'm just going to play out a very small bit from the All About Eve suite before I pass you over to Darren for the news at the top of the hour. So, and just to note, next week I'm going to be doing my Halloween special, which I've been thinking about a lot. So please listen in next week. I've got some really good music from horror films. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.